Welcome to my channel. What if I told you that the man who changed the world of science once failed a school exam? Yes, you heard it right. Today we are going to explore the life of a genius, Albert Einstein. But his journey wasn't easy. It's full of struggles, surprises, and secrets that most people don't know. So stay with me till the end, and let's learn together how a curious boy became one of the greatest minds in history. Chapter 1. The Curious Child. Einstein's Early Life. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in a small city called Ulm in Germany. He was not a famous person then, just a little baby in an ordinary family. But from the very beginning, Albert was different. When he was a child, people thought something was wrong with him. He did not speak until he was almost 4 years old, which worried his parents a lot. Imagine a child being so silent that everyone thinks he might never speak. But Albert was not slow. He was simply thinking deeply, in his own quiet way. As a boy, Albert loved to be alone and think. He was not very social, and he didn't like loud games or noisy crowds. He preferred to read books, look at nature, and ask big questions. One day when he was around 5 years old, his father showed him a simple object. A compass. It was just a small round tool with a needle. But when Albert saw how the needle always pointed in the same direction, something amazing happened. He was fascinated. "Why does it do that?" he asked. "What is moving it? I don't see anything pushing it." That moment stayed in his mind forever. He started to wonder about invisible forces, things we cannot see like magnetism, gravity, and later in life, space and time. In school, young Albert didn't enjoy the usual way of learning. The schools in Germany at that time were very strict. Children had to memorize everything and follow rules. There was no room for imagination or questions. And Albert? He had many questions, but when he asked them, teachers got angry. They thought he was being rude or difficult. Some even said he would never succeed in life. One teacher told him, "You will never amount to anything." Can you believe that? A teacher said that to Albert Einstein. But Albert was not lazy. He just had a different kind of mind. He loved mathematics, and he often solved difficult problems that were far beyond his grade level. He also loved music, especially the violin. He said later that music helped him think more clearly. In fact, math and music were his two best friends when he was young, and they stayed with him all his life. Even though he was smart, Albert didn't do well in school. Not because he wasn't clever, but because the system didn't fit his creative way of thinking. He was curious, imaginative, and wanted to understand the why behind everything, not just memorize facts. But most schools didn't like that. They wanted quiet, obedient students. Albert was not one of them. When he was a teenager, he decided to move to Switzerland to continue his education. There, he applied to a school called the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. But here comes the surprising part. He failed the entrance exam. Yes, Albert Einstein failed. But wait, not in math or physics. He actually did very well in those subjects. He failed in language, history, and general subjects. Isn't that amazing? The man who gave us E equals MC squared couldn't pass a school exam because of his language and writing skills. Luckily, the school saw his talent in science and gave him a chance to join a special program. That small chance would change everything, not only for Albert, but for the entire world. So, what can we learn from young Einstein? That being different is not bad. That asking questions is powerful. That sometimes schools don't see our true talents. And most importantly, never stop being curious. Because curiosity, just like that compass needle, can point us in the right direction. Chapter 2: The Student Who Didn't Fit In. Einstein's Education and Youth. After struggling with the strict and boring school system in Germany, young Albert Einstein decided to take a big step. He moved to Switzerland, a country that had a more relaxed and modern way of teaching. In 1896, at the age of 17, he was accepted into the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. This was a school for future teachers in science and mathematics. It seemed like the perfect place for someone like Albert, who loved math and physics. But even here, things were not easy for him. Albert still had problems with the school system. He was not a fan of authority. He didn't always respect his teachers, especially the ones who taught by memory and routine. He liked to think differently, to ask why, and to find his own way to solve problems. Some professors were annoyed by this. They thought he was lazy or too independent. In fact, he skipped many classes and preferred to study on his own. He spent hours in the library reading books about physics and math. But not just any books. He read the works of the greatest scientists in history, like Isaac Newton and James Clerk Maxwell. Einstein was especially interested in Maxwell's theories about light and electromagnetism. These ideas were not fully understood yet, but Albert felt that there was something very important hidden inside them. He wanted to know how light moved, how time worked, and how the universe followed certain rules. He wasn't just memorizing old facts. He was trying to discover new truths. Even though he was brilliant, Einstein wasn't seen as a great student. His attitude and lack of respect for some professors made it hard for him to get recommendations after graduation. So, when he finished school in 1900, he found it very difficult to get a job. He applied to many universities to become a teacher or assistant, but no one wanted him. Imagine that. Albert Einstein, a future genius, couldn't find a job after college. Finally, in 1902, he got a job, but not in a university or laboratory. He became a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in the city of Bern. His job was to read new ideas from inventors and decide if they were good enough to receive a patent. It wasn't very exciting, but it paid the bills. And strangely, it was the perfect job for Einstein at that time. You see, working at the patent office gave him something very valuable: time. Time to think, time to write, time to explore the big questions in his mind. He would finish his work quickly, and then he would sit at his desk and begin working on his own theories. Nobody at the office knew what he was really doing. Behind that quiet desk, in a small government office, Albert Einstein was secretly developing ideas that would one day change the world of science forever. He later called this period the most creative time in his life. without any pressure from professors or universities. He was free to imagine. He worked in silence, without fame, without titles, and without even access to a proper laboratory. All he had was paper, pencils, and his brilliant mind. This is the spike moment in our story. Think about it. A young man sitting in a simple office, reading boring patent applications by day, and by night, revolutionizing physics. It's like watching a superhero in disguise, quietly planning his next move. No one knew that this quiet worker was about to become one of the most famous scientists in history. So, what can we learn from this part of Einstein's life? Sometimes, life doesn't go the way we plan. Sometimes we don't fit in. We don't get the job we want or the grades we deserve. But that doesn't mean we stop. Einstein didn't stop. He kept learning. He kept thinking. And even in a small, boring job, he used every free moment to follow his passion. This chapter teaches us that your environment doesn't decide your future. Your curiosity and hard work do. And sometimes, the best ideas come not in big universities, but in small, quiet places, when you're alone with your thoughts. Chapter 3. The Miracle Year, 1905, and Einstein's Big Ideas. By the year 1905, Albert Einstein was still working quietly in the patent office in Bern, Switzerland. He had no official title in the scientific world, no laboratory, and no students. He was just a 26-year-old man with a desk job and a passion for physics. But something extraordinary was about to happen. That year, Einstein wrote and published 4 scientific papers that would completely change how we understand the universe. Today, scientists call 1905 Annus Mirabilis, which is Latin for miracle year. And it truly was a miracle, because in just 1 year, Einstein shook the world of science like never before. Let's break down these 4 papers in a simple way so everyone can understand, even if you're just starting to learn English or science. The first paper was about something called the photoelectric effect. Sounds complicated? Don't worry. Imagine you shine light on a metal surface, and suddenly, tiny particles called electrons jump off the metal. Scientists had seen this happen, but they didn't know why. Einstein said, "Maybe light is not just a wave. Maybe it also comes in little packets, or particles of energy." These packets were later called photons. This idea helped start a brand new branch of science called quantum theory. And even though it was just the beginning, this one paper would later win him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. The second paper was about Brownian motion. If you put tiny particles, like pollen, in water and look under a microscope, you'll see them moving around randomly. Scientists couldn't explain why this happened. Einstein said, "This motion proves that atoms and molecules really exist." At that time, many scientists were still not sure if atoms were real. But with this paper, Einstein gave solid proof, using math and logic, that the world is made of tiny, moving particles. The third paper, and probably the most famous, was about the special theory of relativity. This one changed everything. Until then, people thought time and space were always the same, no matter where you were. But Einstein said, what if time and space are different for different people, depending on how fast they're moving. For example, if you were on a spaceship moving close to the speed of light, time would slow down for you compared to someone standing still on Earth. This was a revolutionary idea, and it shocked the scientific world. And now comes the spike moment, the part that made history. In the fourth paper, Einstein introduced one of the most famous equations in the world, E equals mc squared, just 5 simple characters. But what do they mean? E stands for energy. M stands for mass, or matter. C is the speed of light, squared. This tiny formula says something huge, that mass and energy are the same thing, just in different forms. That means a small amount of mass can be turned into a huge amount of energy. This is the principle behind nuclear power, and also nuclear bombs. But more importantly, it showed the deep connection between matter and energy that no one had ever imagined before. Now think about this. Einstein wrote all of this while working a regular job with no lab, no university support, and no one helping him. He was still mostly unknown at that time. But slowly, scientists around the world began to take notice. They read these papers and realized something incredible. This man was not just another physicist. He was a genius who had opened the door to a new way of thinking about the universe. This chapter in Einstein's life teaches us a powerful lesson. You don't need fame or a big title to make a difference. What you need is curiosity, courage, and the discipline to work on your ideas, even when no one is watching. Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." In 1905, he proved it. So the next time you hear E equals mc squared, remember, it's not just a formula. It's a symbol of how one person in one small office changed the world forever, with nothing but a pen, paper, and a dream. Chapter 4: Fame, Family, and Challenges. Einstein's Middle Life. By the year 1915, Albert Einstein was no longer just a quiet man working in an office. He was now a respected physicist working in Berlin, and after years of deep thinking, he completed his greatest scientific work, the general theory of relativity. This was not just a small idea, it was a complete new way of looking at the universe. In this theory, Einstein explained how gravity is not just a force, as Isaac Newton had said. Instead, Einstein showed that gravity is the result of curved space and time. Try to imagine space and time as a soft fabric. When a large object like the sun sits on that fabric, it bends. Planets move in curves because of this bending. This idea was strange and new, but also beautiful. Still, most people didn't understand it right away. It needed proof. That proof came in 1919, during a total solar eclipse. A British scientist, Sir Arthur Eddington, led an expedition to test Einstein's theory. During the eclipse, they took photographs of the stars near the sun. If Einstein was right, the sun's gravity would bend the light from those stars. And guess what? The stars appeared in a different position, just as Einstein had predicted. This was the spike moment of his life. The next morning, newspapers all over the world had giant headlines. One said, lights all askew in the heavens. Another called Einstein the new Newton. Suddenly, the man who once couldn't find a job became world famous overnight. His photo appeared on front pages. He was invited to speak in different countries. Everyone wanted to meet him, talk to him, understand his ideas. But fame is not always easy. Einstein was a shy and simple man. He didn't enjoy crowds, and he didn't care about being rich or popular. He often wore old clothes and didn't care much about his appearance. But he also understood that fame gave him a voice, a chance to speak about important things. He used this attention to promote peace, freedom, and human rights. He spoke out against war, against racism, and for the value of education. In many ways, he became not just a scientist, but a global thinker. While the world saw Einstein as a hero, his personal life was much more difficult. He had married a fellow student from his university days, Mileva Maric, and they had 2 sons. But their marriage had many problems. Einstein was often focused only on his work. He could be distant, even cold at times. Eventually, their marriage ended in divorce, and it was a sad period in both of their lives. Later, Einstein married his cousin, Elsa, who helped take care of him and manage his busy life. Still, he didn't always have a close relationship with his children. His older son, Hans Albert, became an engineer, but his younger son, Eduard, struggled with mental illness. These personal struggles often weighed heavily on Einstein's heart, even while the world cheered for him. During this time, Einstein traveled the world. He visited the United States, Japan, England, France, and many other countries. He met kings, presidents, scientists, and even movie stars. Everywhere he went, people wanted to hear the thoughts of the great genius. But he remained humble and often said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Despite his fame, Einstein never stopped asking questions. He kept working on deep problems in physics, trying to unite gravity with other forces. He searched for what he called a unified field theory, but it was a puzzle he would never solve. This chapter of Einstein's life teaches us something very human. Even the smartest people in the world have challenges, heartbreaks, and struggles. Fame doesn't make everything easy. In fact, it can make personal relationships harder. But what made Einstein special was not just his brain, it was his heart, his values, and his desire to use knowledge for good. So the man who once failed an exam had now become the face of science. But deep inside, he remained the same curious boy who had once stared at a compass and asked, why? Chapter 5. A Voice for Peace. Einstein and the World Wars. By the early 1930s, Albert Einstein was not just the most famous scientist in the world. He had become a symbol of knowledge and wisdom. But dark times were beginning in Germany, his homeland. A man named Adolf Hitler had risen to power, and his political party, the Nazis, started spreading dangerous ideas. They blamed Jewish people for Germany's problems and began passing laws that made life impossible for them. Einstein, being Jewish, was in great danger. He was already a well-known critic of violence and nationalism, so the Nazis targeted him. They even burned his books and put a price on his head. Seeing this, Einstein made a life-changing decision. He would never return to Germany. In 1933, he fled the country and moved to the United States, where he accepted a job at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. This would be his home for the rest of his life. Einstein was not just running away to save himself, he was stepping into a new role. He had always believed in peace, justice, and equality, but now he began to speak out more than ever. He became a public voice against war, racism, and oppression. In America, he openly supported civil rights, even inviting black musicians and scholars into his home when others would not. He believed that every person deserves respect, no matter their race, religion, or background. But even though Einstein was a pacifist, someone who believed in peace and refused to support war, something happened that changed everything. This is the spike moment of our story. In 1939, Einstein learned from other scientists that Nazi Germany might be trying to build an atomic bomb using uranium. This was terrifying. If Hitler had such a weapon, he could destroy entire countries. Einstein didn't have the power to stop it alone, but he could do something important. Together with another physicist, Leo Szilard, Einstein wrote a letter to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In the letter, he warned him about the danger and suggested that the United States begin its own research on atomic energy. This letter, just a few pages long, changed the course of history. It led to the creation of the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. program that developed the first atomic bomb. And although Einstein never worked directly on the project, his name and ideas were deeply connected to it. When the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Einstein was deeply shocked and saddened. He had wanted to stop Hitler, not create a new kind of destruction. He later said that if he had known what the U.S. would do with the bomb, he would have never signed that letter. For the rest of his life, Einstein spoke out strongly against nuclear weapons. He warned the world about the dangers of this new power and said that science must be used to help humanity, not destroy it. He also continued his work for world peace. Einstein believed that countries should not fight each other, but work together. He supported the idea of a global government that would prevent future wars. Some people thought he was dreaming, but Einstein always believed that ideas could change the world, just as his ideas about space and time had done. This chapter shows a different side of Albert Einstein, not the scientist with the chalkboard, but the human being with a heart. A man who used his fame not for power, but for peace. A man who admitted his mistakes and tried to make the world better. In a time when many stayed silent, Einstein spoke out, even when it was dangerous, even when it was unpopular. He once said, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." Albert Einstein chose to do something. He chose to speak. Chapter 6. The legacy lives on, Einstein's final years and what we learn from him. After the chaos of World War II, Albert Einstein lived a much quieter life. He stayed in Princeton, New Jersey, where he had worked since fleeing Germany. Every morning, he walked to his office at the Institute for Advanced Study, wearing the same old sweater, with his hair wild and his eyes full of thought. He never wanted luxury or fame. He just wanted time to think. Even in his final years, Einstein never stopped working. He continued writing about physics, still searching for that one great theory to connect everything in the universe. He called it the unified field theory. Though he never found it, he never gave up. For Einstein, the journey was more important than the destination. He believed that questions were often more valuable than answers. And it wasn't just science that kept him busy. Einstein also spoke out about important issues like world peace, nuclear disarmament, and human rights. He believed that the world needed more compassion and cooperation. He said that science without values was dangerous, and that we must always use knowledge to help, not harm, others. In 1952, something incredible happened. The newly formed country of Israel offered Einstein the chance to become its president. Imagine that. The most brilliant scientist in the world being asked to lead a country. But Einstein said no. He believed he was not a man of politics. He said, "I deal with equations, not people." It was a humble response, but also a wise one. He knew who he was and who he was not. Einstein lived until the age of 76, and he passed away in 1955. But even in his final days, his mind was full of ideas. He kept a notebook by his bedside. He answered letters from students, fans, and scientists around the world. And now comes the spike moment, one that shows just how deep his love for knowledge truly was. Just before he died, Einstein wrote a letter to an old friend. In it, he talked about hope for the future, about peace, and about the next generation of scientists. Even though his body was weak, his mind was still strong, still full of wonder. He was still asking questions, still dreaming. Einstein once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." This is perhaps the greatest lesson he left us, not just how to understand the universe, but how to think, wonder, and never stop learning. For English learners and viewers like you, Einstein's story is more than just history. It's a powerful example. You don't need to be perfect in school. You don't need to follow the crowd. What you do need is curiosity, courage, and commitment. Einstein made mistakes. He faced rejection, but he never gave up. He believed in the power of ideas and in the beauty of asking why. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're learning English, starting school, or chasing your dream, remember Albert Einstein. Remember the boy who asked questions, the young man who struggled to find a job, the scientist who changed the world, the human being who stood for peace and kindness. Because Einstein's true legacy is not just in the theories he created, but in the way he lived his life, with honesty, humility, and endless curiosity. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Albert Einstein's story is not just about science. It's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep learning amazing stories in simple English, Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment below. Tell me, what part of Einstein's story inspired you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video.